When the phone stays dark, your mind starts racing to fill the void with worst-case scenarios. You convince yourself that her silence is a sign of total peace, that she's completely moved on while you're stuck in the mud. To cope, you start performing mental gymnastics, trying to find hidden meanings in old conversations like you're decoding an ancient script. You find yourself refreshing her social media profiles, checking for a new post or a like, as if it's a vital sign that tells you whether you still exist in her world. This constant monitoring is exhausting. You're essentially waiting for a green light from someone who isn't even looking at the traffic signal, and that desperation starts to make you feel small and powerless. You might hate yourself for caring this much, labeling your emotions as a sign of weakness, but that's a lie you're telling yourself to stay in the cycle. This isn't weakness, it's an awakening. You are finally starting to feel the heavy daily tax of outsourcing your happiness. You've been living on someone else's terms, letting their lack of a response dictate whether you have a good day or a bad one. That internal friction you feel, that weakness, is actually your self-respect trying to break through the noise. It's a signal that you've overspent your emotional currency on someone who isn't investing back. What you need right now isn't a hang in there or a comforting platitude that things might work out. Comfort is just a sedative that keeps you waiting longer. What you actually need is a hard, repetitive truth that shocks your system back into reality. Your nervous system has become addicted to the high of her attention and the crash of her absence, and it's currently begging for a fix. You have to feed your mind reminders of your own value until your body catches up to the decision your self-respect has already made. You are reclaiming your energy from a ghost, and while that process is loud and uncomfortable, it's the only way to stop being a spectator in your own life. When the phone stays silent, your brain tries to fill the gap with a story. You assume her silence is a calculated move or a sign that you've been erased, but the reality is much simpler. You left an imprint. Just because you aren't talking doesn't mean you don't exist in her mind, and this is the part that hurts, an imprint is not an invitation. Your biggest mistake right now is treating her lack of a text like a final courtroom verdict on your value as a man. You're acting like a desperate lawyer trying to appeal a case that's already been closed, presenting evidence to yourself about why you were enough. When you do this, you are effectively handing her the keys to your self-worth and asking her to decide if you're allowed to feel good today. That isn't love. That's outsourcing your soul to someone who isn't even on the clock. Real life doesn't follow the if she misses me, she'll call logic we see in movies. In the real world, people don't act based on their feelings alone. They act based on what they are willing to risk. A woman can sit in her room, miss your voice, and think about you for hours, yet still choose to do absolutely nothing about it. Why? Because thinking is free, but choosing is expensive. To choose you, she has to risk her pride, admit a mistake, or face the consequences of why things ended in the first place. Most people would rather sit with the quiet weight of regret than pay the high price of vulnerability. Her silence isn't necessarily a sign of peace. It's often a shield. Ultimately, she remains silent because you aren't just an ex. You're a mirror. When she thinks of you, she sees the version of herself that existed when she was with you. If she didn't show up right, or if she walked away from something genuine, looking at you means looking at her own flaws. Silence is her way of avoiding that reflection. She isn't ready to face the mirror of your presence because it forces her to confront truths about herself she'd rather keep buried. Stop waiting for her to break the silence to validate your existence. She can miss the idea of you and still refuse the reality of you because the reality requires a level of accountability she isn't prepared to give. When a woman goes silent, your brain immediately starts writing a script to fill the void. You assume her silence is a calculated move or a sign that you've been completely erased from her life. But the reality is usually much simpler. You left an imprint. Just because you aren't speaking doesn't mean you don't exist in her mind. However, and this is the part that hurts, an imprint is not an invitation. Your biggest mistake right now is treating her lack of a text like a final courtroom verdict on your value as a man. You're acting like a desperate lawyer trying to appeal a case that's already been closed, constantly presenting evidence to yourself about why you were enough. When you do this, you are effectively handing her the keys to your self-worth and asking her to decide if you're allowed to feel good today. That isn't love. That's outsourcing your soul to someone who isn't even on the clock. Real life doesn't follow the if she misses me, she'll call logic we see in movies. In the real world, people don't act based on their feelings alone. They act based on what they are willing to risk. A woman can sit in her room, miss your voice, and think about you for hours, yet still choose to do absolutely nothing about it. Why? Because thinking is free, but choosing is expensive. To choose you, she has to risk her pride, admit a mistake, or face the consequences of why things ended in the first place. Most people would rather sit with the quiet weight of regret than pay the high price of vulnerability. Her silence isn't necessarily a sign of peace, it's often a shield. Ultimately, she remains silent because you aren't just an ex, you're a mirror. When she thinks of you, she sees the version of herself that existed when she was with you. If she didn't show up right, or if she walked away from something genuine, looking at you means looking at her own flaws. Silence is her way of avoiding that reflection. She isn't ready to face the mirror of your presence because it forces her to confront truths about herself she'd rather keep buried. She can miss the idea of you and still refuse the reality of you because the reality requires a level of accountability she isn't prepared to give. Stop waiting for her to break the silence to validate your existence. Your value was never her decision to make. In the world of dating and relationships, there are two types of men: the man who provides attention and the man who provides gravity. Attention is cheap and abundant. It's the dopamine hit of a good morning text, a like on a photo, or a desperate compliment. Because attention is so easy to give, it's also incredibly easy to replace. Any guy with a smartphone and a bit of spare time can fill that void. But gravity is different. Gravity is the weight of a man who is grounded in his own purpose. When a man with gravity walks into a room, he doesn't need to be the loudest person there to be felt. He doesn't perform for approval, he doesn't beg for a response, and he doesn't feel the need to prove his worth to anyone. He is simply anchored. This kind of presence creates a sense of stability that is rare in a world full of people constantly chasing the next distraction. A woman never forgets a man who provided that kind of gravity. It's the unique ability to make her feel completely safe without ever making her feel trapped or suffocated. This is the man who can lead a relationship with confidence, but never feels the need to control her every move to feel secure. Most importantly, he is the man who can walk away without a dramatic scene or a desperate plea when his standards aren't being met. Because he knows his own value, his exit is quiet and absolute. This creates a haunting contrast for a woman who is used to men who crumble or lash out the moment they lose her attention. The reason she stays silent now is often because she realizes she lost that gravity, and that realization is heavy. Reaching out to you would require her to drop her shield and admit that she let something genuinely valuable slip through her fingers. For many, that admission is a direct hit to their identity and their pride. She might be sitting in the silence because she isn't ready to own the mistake of losing a man who didn't need her, but chose her. She's waiting for you to break and provide that cheap attention again, because if you do, the gravity is gone, and she no longer has to face the fact that she lost someone rare. When you decide to chase, you are handing her a massive emotional reward for doing absolutely nothing. This is the trap of relief without responsibility. By reaching out, liking her photos, or trying to convince her of your value, you give her the ego boost she's craving without requiring her to actually commit to you or fix the problems that led to the breakup. She gets to feel wanted, secure, and powerful while she's still out there living a life that doesn't include you. Essentially, you are taking away all the consequences of her losing you. If she never has to feel the sting of your absence because you're always just one text away, she has no reason to ever respect you or reconsider her decision. You become an emotional insurance policy, someone she can use to feel better whenever her self-esteem takes a hit, all while she remains free of any obligation to give you the love or loyalty you deserve. This dynamic becomes even more toxic when you start hovering. You might think that watching her stories or staying friends is a way to stay relevant, but in reality, it's just staying emotionally parked outside her life. This behavior sends a loud, clear message. I am still here, I am still yours, and I am waiting for you to pick me up. This completely destroys your leverage. In any negotiation, including relationships. The person who is most willing to walk away holds the power. By hovering, you are showing her that you are incapable of walking away. You are telling her that your world still revolves around her every move, which confirms to her that she hasn't actually lost anything of value yet. The tension she feels right now isn't necessarily about romance. It's about the contrast between you and the rest of the world. She compares the grounded, real connection she had with you to the shallow, anxious, and hollow entertainment she's finding elsewhere. However, don't mistake that tension for a desire to return. For someone who is used to living on autopilot or chasing cheap thrills, a real man is actually terrifying. Being with you requires her to be real too, which means being vulnerable, honest, and accountable. She may be sitting in the tension of missing you, but as long as you keep chasing, she can enjoy the memory of you while avoiding the responsibility of actually being with you. To win, you have to stop being her relief and start being the man who is truly gone. Stop waiting for a notification to breathe. When you treat a single text message like it's the only thing that can save your day, you aren't experiencing love. You're experiencing a chemical withdrawal. True love is a grounded, steady choice made by two people. But what you're feeling right now is frantic and obsessive. You are spending your hours interpreting the meaning of a ghost, trying to turn scraps of silence into a meal. This isn't a romantic tragedy. It's an addiction to uncertainty. The reason you feel like you're starving isn't that she's gone. It's because you've completely abandoned yourself to monitor someone else. You've stopped caring for your own life to become a full-time spectator of hers, and that internal void is what's actually causing the pain. You have to shift your mission away from her and back to yourself. Many men make the mistake of trying to act a certain way just to make her regret her decision, but that is a trap. If you are doing things specifically to get a reaction from her, you are still being controlled by her. You are still seeking her validation, just through a different lens. A man with self-respect doesn't need to play games or act fake cold or petty. Instead, he becomes warm but fundamentally unavailable for anything that doesn't meet his standards. He realizes that he shouldn't have to send paragraphs of text to explain his heart to someone who is perfectly comfortable misunderstanding him. He knows that if a woman truly wants to be in his life, she will work to make it easier, not harder. The hardest truth to swallow is that if she is making it difficult for you to be with her, she has already made her choice. You cannot negotiate someone into valuing you. When you stop trying to convince her and start aligning with your own purpose, you reclaim your power. You stop being a man who is waiting and start being a man who is moving. You don't need to be mean or distant. You simply need to be busy building a life that doesn't have a vacancy for someone who treats you like an option. Real alignment means recognizing that your time and energy are too valuable to be spent on someone who is content leaving you in a state of confusion. To take back your life, you have to stop negotiating with a person who isn't even in the room. You can't talk your way back into respect. You have to act your way there. The first and most vital step is to cut all fake proximity. This means you stop watching her stories, stop checking in on her profile, and stop keeping tabs on her life through mutual friends. You might tell yourself you're just being curious or that it's harmless, but it's actually a form of emotional self-harm. Every time you see her face or see her moving on without you, you rip the wound back open and reset your recovery clock. By cutting the digital cord, you stop giving her free, unearned access to your mental space and start protecting your own peace of mind. Once the digital door is shut, you must close the communication door entirely. This means no more soft reaching out, no hope you're doing well texts, no sharing memes you think she'd like, and no just checking in. Your attention is the most valuable currency you own, and you need to stop giving it away like a charity. If she isn't actively working to be in your life, she doesn't deserve a seat at the table. From there, you must redirect that massive energy you've been wasting on her back into yourself. Focus on your fitness, your finances, and your craft. A man without a mission will inevitably turn a woman into his mission, and that is a guaranteed recipe for losing your identity. When you build a life that is exciting and productive, her absence becomes a footnote rather than the headline. The final 2 steps are about shifting your internal identity and preparing for the future. You need to update your language and call your feelings what they actually are. Stop saying, "I miss her," which implies she is a prize you've lost. Instead, say, I miss the feeling I had when I abandoned my own standards just to keep a connection alive. This reframes the situation from a loss of her to a gain of self-accountability. Finally, you must set your boundaries now, before your emotions get the better of you. Decide today how you will handle it if she reaches out with a low-effort, hey stranger, or a late-night text. If the message doesn't contain clear effort, responsibility, and an apology, it isn't real. It's just a temperature check to see if you're still waiting. By deciding your response in advance, you ensure that your future actions come from a place of strength rather than a moment of loneliness. The ultimate shift happens when you stop obsessing over whether she misses you and start focusing on whether she is actually good for you. You have to realize that emotion is just the weather. It's volatile, it's temporary, and it changes with the wind. A woman can feel a sudden burst of nostalgia for you on a Tuesday night, but that doesn't mean she's ready to be a partner on Wednesday morning. You aren't looking for a mood swing or a fleeting moment of sadness from her. You're looking for character, which is the long-term climate of a person's soul. Character is what determines if someone stays when things get difficult or if they run the moment their feelings fluctuate. Your value as a man is not measured by who decides to come back to you. It is proven by the man you become when there is no one around to applaud your progress. The real work happens in the quiet moments when you choose your goals over your cravings. The moment you stop trying to inhabit her mind, you finally get your own back. For too long, you've been living as a tenant in her head, trying to figure out her silence and analyze her motives. When you evict her from your thoughts, you regain the mental bandwidth to actually build your life. You'll find that your questions change. You will stop asking, why is she silent, which is a victim's question, and you'll start asking the hard, masculine question, why was I so available to someone who was comfortable leaving me in the dark? This is the moment of true accountability. It's the realization that you allowed your standards to drop for someone who wasn't willing to meet you halfway. This isn't about being angry. It's about being honest with yourself so you never repeat the mistake. This shift in perspective is the ultimate upgrade. You aren't acting unbothered to win her back. You are becoming undeniably valuable because you have reclaimed your time, your energy, and your purpose. You are no longer the guy waiting for a sign. You have become the sign. When you live with this kind of grounded self-respect, you stop being a beggar for attention and start being a man of substance. This is the version of you that is meant to lead, to create, and to thrive. Whether she notices or not becomes irrelevant because you are no longer building your foundation on the shifting sands of her opinion. You're building it on the solid rock of your own results.